I opened my garage that morning and just stood there, coffee going cold in my hand, because nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for seeing two giant black pickup trucks parked inside a space you built with your own hands. Not in the driveway, not half over the curb, not kind of on your property. Inside my garage, lined up neat like they paid the mortgage. And the worst part was I recognized those plates immediately. My name's Daniel. I'm 38, and I've lived on Willow Creek Lane for close to 10 years now. It's the kind of street people dream about when they say they want peace. A quiet cul-de-sac, maples arching overhead, kids riding bikes in lazy circles, porch lights coming on at dusk like clockwork. In the evenings, you can hear leaves moving across the pavement, a dog barking 2 houses over, somebody clinking dishes through an open kitchen window. It always felt safe, steady, ordinary in the best way. My house sits on the corner, a modest brick 2-story with big front windows that catch the morning sun. But the real heart of the place has always been the garage. I built that space from scratch when I moved in. Not hired out, built. The shelves are cedar cut and stained by hand. The workbench is scarred in all the right ways. There's always a faint smell of sawdust oil, old metal, warm wood. Sunlight slips through the frosted glass panels and turns the dust in the air into these floating gold specks that look almost holy if you catch them at the right time. That garage isn't just where I keep tools. It's where I disappear when life gets loud. It's where I restored an old motorcycle one winter, where I sanded down antique chairs for my sister, where I taught myself half-decent woodworking off late-night YouTube videos and a lot of trial and error. Everything in there has a place. Every drawer, every hook, every jar of screws. It's not fancy, but it's mine. My sanctuary, my reset button, the one place that always felt untouched by other people's chaos. So when I saw those trucks in there, my stomach dropped so hard it actually hurt. And those trucks belong to Carl. Carl lives across the street. 47, always in a bright Hawaiian shirt like he's on permanent vacation, even when he's out there sweating through yard work in August. Perfect mustache, pressed khakis, polished loafers, smile, a little too practiced to ever feel warm. At first glance, he's the guy people love in neighborhoods like ours. Friendly, involved, always waving, always offering unsolicited advice with a grin pasted on like it belongs in a campaign ad. But if you live near him long enough, you start seeing the seams. His house is immaculate in a way that stops being impressive and starts feeling threatening. Lawn trimmed every Tuesday, same time. Hedges cut into sharp geometric lines. Seasonal decorations swapped out with military precision, like the man can't sleep unless the wreath comes down the exact day Christmas ends. Everything about his place says control, not pride control. And Carl notices everything. Who comes home late? Who has guests on weeknights? Which trash can stayed out too long? He brings up HOA rules at block parties like he's casually discussing the weather, except there's always a little edge in it. This quiet reminder that he knows the bylaws better than most people know their own birthdays. Months earlier, he'd made this weird offhand comment to me while I was trimming the side yard, said property lines are more flexible than people think, if you understand the language. He laughed when he said it like it was a joke. Standing there in front of those trucks, I realized it hadn't been a joke at all. I set my coffee down on the hood of my car and walked toward the garage, like maybe the scene would change as I got closer, like I'd suddenly understand some reasonable explanation. But there wasn't one. The engines were still warm. The smell of exhaust hung in the air, sharp and ugly against the cedar and oil that normally made the space feel like home. Tire tracks had carved through the edge of my flower beds, chewing up a patch of damp soil and snapping stems I'd been babying for 2 seasons. I checked the plates anyway, even though I already knew. One truck was Carl's personal vehicle. The other belonged to his landscaping company. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. I just stood there listening to the silence after the tone, my pulse pounding in my ears so hard it sounded like a second heartbeat. It wasn't random. That was the part that got under my skin. Those trucks weren't dumped there carelessly. They were positioned perfectly centered, deliberate, like he wanted me to see how comfortable he was making himself at home in my space. He hadn't just trespassed, he'd staged it. That's when anger finally caught up to the shock. I went inside, grabbed my laptop, and started digging. HOA handbook first. then county property ordinances, then trespassing laws, then municipal regulations about unauthorized vehicle storage. It was one of those strange moments where rage makes you weirdly efficient. I highlighted clauses, printed pages, opened folders, took timestamps, snapped photos of everything, the trucks, the tracks, the damaged flowers, the blocked workbench, all of it. And every single thing I read told me the same story: Carl had no right to do this. Then I got to the detail that changed everything. A couple years earlier, I'd leased the garage as secure overflow storage for the county sheriff's department on a limited use agreement. It wasn't full-time and it didn't interfere with my workshop, but it meant the space wasn't just personal property. There was official paperwork attached to it. Authorized access, recorded use, liability, the kind of thing Carl absolutely should have thought about before playing little king of the cul-de-sac. So I called the deputy listed on the account. He listened quiet for a second, then gave this short, almost disbelieving laugh. Well, he said, that's either the dumbest thing I've heard all week or the boldest. I'm not in the mood for either, I told him. No, I get it, he said, and his tone changed fast. Take photos, don't touch the vehicles. If he refuses to move them, we can step in. And Daniel, make sure you save every message. That one phone call steadied me. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I suddenly understood I wasn't crazy for feeling violated. This wasn't neighbor drama. This was someone testing how far he could go if he acted confident enough. By late afternoon, I had a folder full of evidence and a formal complaint drafted for the HOA. I also had a knot in my chest that wouldn't go away because for all the paperwork and legal backing in the world, I still had to look Carl in the eye. I found him out front just before sunset, trimming his hedges like he was auditioning to be named mayor of Pettyville. The electric trimmer buzzed, then died when he saw me crossing the street. He looked up, slowly, smiled that same polished little smile, and leaned back like he had all the time in the world. Carl, I said we need to talk about my garage. He didn't even flinch. Ah, he said like we were discussing borrowed sugar. Your garage. That told me everything. I just thought I'd borrow some space, he said. Temporary issue, no need to make it dramatic. I actually laughed just once because that was such a ridiculous thing to say. I didn't know what else to do. Borrow, I said. You parked 2 trucks inside a locked structure on my property without permission. His expression tightened, but only around the edges. I assumed it wouldn't be a problem. That's interesting, I said, because I assumed adults know not to break into other people's garages. He straightened up at that. Now hold on. No, I cut in and my voice surprised even me because it came out calm, cold, steady. You're going to move those trucks tonight. Not tomorrow, not this weekend, tonight. Because if you don't, I already have the HOA complaint ready. I've documented the damage and the sheriff's department is aware. That landed. Not hard and dramatic like in a movie, harder than that actually. Subtle. Real. His grin flickered, then vanished for half a second. His eyes shifted, calculating. For the first time since I'd known him, Carl looked uncertain. The sheriff, he said. You leased yourself right into a bad decision, I said. That garage is on a county storage agreement, so this isn't just you being obnoxious, Carl. This is trespassing with paperwork. He looked past me toward my house, toward the garage he'd treated like overflow parking, and I watched the confidence drain out of him in tiny, satisfying increments. That seems extreme, he muttered. No, I said. What's extreme is parking your trucks inside your neighbor's sanctuary and acting like he should be flattered. There was a long silence, then the kind where you can hear birds settling into trees and a lawn sprinkler clicking 2 houses down. He finally nodded once, stiff and angry. Fine, he said. I'll move them. I held his gaze. Do that. And Carl, don't ever mistake my patience for permission again. He turned and walked inside without another word. That should have been the end of it. In a normal neighborhood with normal people, it probably would have been. But Carl wasn't normal, and I knew it. Men like that don't like being told no. They hate being seen clearly even more. The next morning, the trucks were gone. My garage was mine again. The air smelled like cedar instead of exhaust. The tools were untouched. The workbench sat exactly where it always had, like the room itself had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. I should have felt relief, and I did for maybe 5 seconds. Then I saw the package on my front porch. Plain brown paper, no return address, heavy enough to matter. For one stupid second, I thought Great Carl's escalated. Maybe a threat, maybe some smug little note, maybe a final act of suburban nonsense. I carried it inside, opened it carefully, and found 2 laminated parking permits with the county sheriff's seal, plus a folded note. It read, "Enjoy your garage. Consider this a reminder that boundaries are real. Sheriff's Department." I stared at it, then laughed so hard I had to sit down. But the real twist came later that week. Mrs. Alvarez, who sat on the HOA board and mostly kept to herself, knocked on my door carrying a folder. She told me in that calm voice people use when they've been waiting a long time to say something that Carl had been trying to pressure the board for months. Complaints about everyone, survey questions, requests to clarify shared access language near corner lots. He'd even floated the idea that underused structures should be subject to community convenience review, which is the kind of phrase only a control freak or a future dictator comes up with. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "You weren't the first boundary he tested. You were just the first one who pushed back with enough proof to stop him." That one sentence changed the whole thing for me. Because suddenly this wasn't just about my garage or my flowers or two stupid trucks. It was about what happens when one person keeps getting away with small invasions until they start believing they own the air around everybody else. Carl hadn't done this because he needed parking. He'd done it because he thought confidence was the same thing as authority. He was wrong. The HOA sent out a neighborhood-wide notice the next day reminding residents about trespassing, unauthorized property use, and liability exposure. No names, of course, but on a street like Willow Creek Lane, anonymity lasts about 7 minutes. After that word moved the way it always does, quietly, efficiently, with just enough detail to do real damage. Carl stopped waving at me after that, stopped lingering near my property, stopped asking questions, stopped pretending he was the unofficial sheriff of the block, which was funny because the actual sheriff's department ended up expanding my lease and offering adjacent secured storage after reviewing the situation. Carl had tried to make my space feel smaller, and somehow all he did was make my position stronger. That was the part that felt almost poetic. A week later, I was back in the garage late in the evening, the overhead light humming softly, dust drifting through the beam, my hand resting on the workbench where I'd spent so many quiet hours over the years. And I had this thought, I wish I'd learned younger. Some people don't respect kindness, they study it for weak spots. They see calm and call it softness. They see decency and mistake it for fear. And sometimes the only thing that teaches them where the line is consequence. Not revenge for revenge's sake, not cruelty, just consequence. That's what satisfied me most in the end. Not that Carl got embarrassed, though I won't lie, that helped. It was that he finally ran into something he couldn't smile his way around: documentation law, witnesses, structure, reality. All the things men like him assume only apply to other people. So yes, when I close that garage door now, it feels different. Better somehow. Safer, but also sharper. Like the space. And I both learned the same lesson at the same time. Peace is wonderful, but peace without boundaries is just an invitation. And Carl? Well, these days he looks away whenever he passes my house. No grin, no comments, no fake friendliness. Just a stiff little nod from a man who found out too late that karma sometimes wears a county badge and carries a clipboard. Now I'm curious, what would you have done if a neighbor parked their vehicles inside your garage without permission? Would you confront them face to face, go straight to the authorities, or try to handle it quietly first? And where do you think the line is between standing up for yourself and getting even? Drop your take in the comments. And if you've ever had your own Carl in real life, tell the story. I want to know how you handled it and whether justice showed up quietly or all at once.